Okay, so we're going to get started back up. I welcome back from break. I hope you had a wonderful, relaxing, rejuvenating break. Good to be back. We obviously have a lot of Photoshop left to cover, and today we're really going to start getting into more of the advanced Photoshop techniques. The exercise is going to change slightly from what's printed on the page. I tried this out this morning, and some of the people didn't seem to finish where I thought they were going to, so I misjudged the time. So we're going to cut some stuff off the end of this. Though this is a lot of work, and it's definitely something that's important for you to get the hang of, because you're going to need it as we go forward. And when you do assignment 102, you're certainly going to need these skills. So I thought I would start today, before we get into the actual demo work, which is the bulk of what we're doing. I thought I would introduce a bunch of example projects that kind of work with assignment 102 in terms of getting your mind thinking about what kind of works and what doesn't. And certainly some of these will border on the creepy, but that's to be expected. The truth is that what the assignment 102 seeks to do is to bend reality and to give us an example image or an image that could kind of potentially happen because we're visually seeing it. We're fooling ourselves into believing that it exists when in fact it's false. It's been made up of component pieces. So an image like this, obviously this is not a three-eyed person. It's two separate photographs that have been combined together to make one photo out of it. And when you kind of look initially at it, you're a little bit confused on is it actually a three-eyed person or not. And so that's kind of the fun of this, and it's meant for you to have a good time and to play around with it. Sometimes it's about seeing what could potentially go together. I don't think this is the best example because the shadows don't match on the toes to the way the tree is, so the lighting conditions are off. Something like this is done frequently, and it's a relatively easy thing to do, very simple in its masking, but it's a combination of two photos. It's a photo of a younger person looking against a photo of an older person, or vice versa in a mirror, so you see that transition. And I'll show you a couple more variants on this general theme. But it's as simple as taking a picture, the first picture being the old person with their reflection in the mirror, and then substituting the younger person in the exact same picture, and then the mirror of one picture versus the mirror of the other picture in terms of how they come together. So it's a pretty simple mask to do, pretty easy to execute. Something like this might involve a little bit more work, but it's a little bit more on the creepy side at the same time. But it can be done, and it's certainly something that you could explore should you be interested in. This one's just plain weird. Something like this is again how you see reality in terms of, you've got the hands that are growing other hands, etc., the way trees would. To me, this is less successful because it has no background. It has no integration into the background. So it looks like a fake object. And I think if it had a background and was integrated such that it kind of surprised you instead of dominated the composition, it might be a little bit more intriguing. Something like this doesn't have the background, and again, I think I might rather have the background, but it's so well done that I couldn't exclude it. Part of the thing about deciding what to do when it comes to this is looking at the way things might naturally join together. So if we look at this image of the shoes, if you look at leather shoes, they always have wrinkles that run across the toes where people walk. And so the combination of those wrinkles, coupled with the wrinkles that are naturally in your knuckles or the knuckles of your toes, the two come together rather nicely. So you take the wrinkles of the shoes that are kind of coming down here in that pattern, and they match up with the wrinkles on the toes, and suddenly the two sets start to come together. Obviously there's some Photoshop work to adjust the color of the toes for them to come together as well as they do, but just naturally finding that commonality can really help in terms of how you bring these two images together. This one's a little bit, I think it would be more successful if it was a person's photograph rather than the mannequin. This one is really, really well done. I've seen people try to do something similar, and it's a lot about getting the perspective just right and the lighting just right for these actually to come together as nicely as they do. But the combination of the leaf and the face and the kind of how they work together in this is particularly well done. Something like this is really a matter of depth of field, right? The things that are behind the face is blurred out, And the fact that they're blurred out really helps this image because we don't worry about, other than the black area that represents the puzzle piece, we don't need to see the inside, we don't need to see the edge of the puzzle piece, it's just the shape of the puzzle piece that's acting. And then obviously the eye pulled into the front, into the foreground is a very nice compositional technique to add dimension to the particular photo. Sometimes it's a combination of like a line drawing or a filter or something that's interacting with another set of photos and how those various pieces come together. Right? Sometimes it's seeing, this is kind of like seeing the shapes in the clouds or whatever. You know, when you look at the abstract shapes and you come up with it, you see the ends of all the carrots and you think, what if one of them was an eyeball instead? I mean, you know, so it's those kinds of things and how they kind of come together. I really like this image. I think this is fantastic. But part of the reason it works is the way that the lighting of the scene kind of works. It fits. It feels like the arms belong reaching out of the toilet, right? If I were to pick on anything, it would be how this hand, the shadow doesn't quite work as it wraps around. It's pretty close, but if you were going to pick on what doesn't quite work, I think that would be it. A combination here of the cracked earth coupled with the eye and the correlation of skin to the cracked earth, I think it works pretty well. It also works well because it's so close up, right? And the combination of the vibrancy of the eye and the color in contrast to the black and white of the earth, I think works nicely as part of a composition. So this is another major theme that people tend to do variants on, which I think is again well done. And that is the missing piece in the photo. So here, in this particular example, you would take a picture of your feet with your pants down, right? Obviously, your legs would go through. And then you very carefully step out of your pants and take another photo from the exact same angle with the exact same lighting, such that you could see the inside of your pants without the legs. And then it's a combination of those two images that come together that kind of blur the reality of things. And you'll see more examples of this as we go forward and kind of how they work together. This one, I apologize, it's a little bit blurry, but it's the same concept where the skin detaches from the face. Similar in its general theme. Something like this works particularly nice because of the lighting in the scene and the fact that the person who's hiding behind the mug of coffee has a shadow that's being cast in relation to where the light is coming from. Right? So the fact that the lighting conditions kind of work make this a realistic image. So you want to pay attention to the two images that you take and make sure that the light comes from the same direction and that the elements that you put together cast shadows into the scene. It's one real good way of integrating the two. I don't know, this one just seems silly, but I like it. So another variant on the theme of the younger looking into the older mirror reflection thing. In this case, it's the kitten and it's seeing the reflection of the lion. So this brings up a good point about assignment 102, and that is that while you may have access to take the picture of the kitten against the reflection, you might not have access to get the picture of the lion. Certainly, I don't have a lion roaming around my house to take a picture of. So when it comes to something like this, I don't mind if you use a Creative Commons licensed image as long as you link back and say this is where I got the image. But at least one of the images that you're combining should be your own. Right? So I'm not looking for just a conglomeration of other people's images that you put together. You need to at least take one image yourself. But if you need the picture of the lion and you can't find it, I understand. Right? Sometimes it's about bending, the reality of what's really possible. And so in this case, the same kind of thing. But again, well composed. Unless you're really good at photographing liquids in kind of slow motion freeze frame, I don't think this is a realistic combination of images. However, I think it's really, really well done, so I had to show it to you. Right? Another example here of, it's a little bit on the silly side, but it's composed well, and I think this is a particularly good example of consistent lighting in the two photos. So in this particular instance, right, we have the lighting of the mom, right, is coming from this side going that direction. So we have shadowing on the back side here, right? Same thing when we take the photo of the baby, right? Light's coming from this side with the shadowing there. Part of the reason these two images combine so well is because the light is so consistent in both images. So when you set up these kinds of shots, you really want to make sure that those lighting conditions match up. And that's part of how the images can tie so nicely together, right? I just think this one's cute. I couldn't resist. right? Goofy but cute. I think this one's a very different juxtaposition of scales, but I think it, literally fish scales, but no, in scales in terms of big and large and small. And I think that it's particularly well done too, because lighting conditions are relatively uniform, but the two blend really, really nicely together. And getting these images is obviously challenging, but at the same time they kind of blend the two scales nicely together, and I think it's really well done. Right? Something like this with the broken pottery of the hands versus the pot itself is safe. This is a pretty hard one to do unless you break something, right? So you would have to apply your skin as a texture on top of the broken pieces. It's pretty hard to fake broken pieces unless you really know what you're doing. So this might involve the sacrifice of something if you were going to try to do the broken piece. So another example here of the juxtaposition of scales and how these two images come together. But again, part of it is how the light works in the scene. So if we look down here at this little person, okay, notice that the shadow is coming from slightly behind the person, the sun is coming from behind the person. We get a little bit of shadow in the foreground here. If we look at the guitar, the same thing is happening. The light's coming slightly from the back, and we're getting these little rings, right, as part of the highlights there, but the face of the guitar is actually lit from, it's reflected lights. The sun is behind the guitar, and that's part of what makes this compositionally work. So it's paying attention to those lighting conditions that make these really work nicely. So another example where you've removed something, right? So in this case, it's a kind of a unique combination, and I think they've taken it a little bit further, which I like. And that is that the person is obviously sitting and ironing their clothes, but the clothes come off of them and onto the board. But they've also added themselves back in at the bottom where you've got feet dangling at the end. So it's this combination of I exist, I don't exist, and then I exist again. So it's taking it one step further, and I think it's well done and certainly well composed as the final image. This is a little bit of a blending of perspectives in terms of how these pieces of the room come together, where you've got the upper view transitioning to the lower view. It's kind of creative and kind of different. This one would be hard to do without some melted ice cream. And again, part of the reason it's successful is because of the consistency of the lighting in the scene as they go forward. You guys can see this a little bit better than the morning class did, but I think this is also very well done, where the bed sheet turns into the winterscape. It's definitely clearer on the computer screen than it is on the projector, but there's little details that work nicely, like the tree that's in the bedroom with the snow and the little bits of snow as the sheet transitions into that. So it's really seeing how to transition those various pieces together. Something like this, another great example of two images taken at two different times from the exact same spot. So we've got one image that is the kind of daytime sunny scene, and then we've got the stormy scene of the same image. And then it's a matter of applying one image on top of these sheets of paper that are being rolled out in the third image. Now this probably involved 3 total images, one being the shot behind, one being the shot during the day, and one image involving the person and the ladder and the rolls. Right? Over in here, you could probably fake this okay in Photoshop with some collaging, but the actual roll and the person on the ladder is probably a third image that's put together. I particularly like the little bit of grass that's one-sided as part of this roll down in the corner. So little details like that can really enhance the overall combination of images. So a little bit more surrealistic, but still kind of entertaining. The tree upside down with a little bit of roots coming out, I think, helps in this particular image. This one, different take on it altogether, where the boards being painted become the ocean. But I think part of what's nice is that it's a black and white image except for the paint. So the paint has that blue color, and it makes it kind of this surrealistic image. I think this one was particularly well done as well. The image was taken in two positions, one being the person dragging the tarp behind them to get that kind of folding pattern, and the other obviously of the road, and then blending the two together such that you're kind of pulling the road out and laying it down. I think it's really well done. Again, very nicely composed as an overall image. I'm less enthralled with this one. I think it's a little bit more on the weird side, but such is life. This one's a pretty fun difference. And I think part of the reason this works as well as it does is because of the person and the bike at the top. and that they're interacting with the scene and kind of wondering, ooh, how did this happen and why is it so bizarre, right? But it's a combination of views that have been folded together to create this strange transition. Another example here of kind of sheets becoming winter, right, and the combination of the two scenes. I like this one, right? There's just something about it that's entertaining. Breaking reality a bit in terms of how they come together, but it's still within the reason of kind of entertainment. This one would be particularly hard to do because it would involve a lot more work. You have to create the inside of the house in the section, so it would be a lot more pieces that would have to come together for it to happen. But I think it was really well done, so it's worth showing. Right? The converse kind of shoe turning into the paint splatters, same general concept. But again, hard to execute unless you have really good photography skills. Turning the person into stone, relatively reasonable to do. It's just a combination of two different images and how they come together. Right? So let's move from the professional or pro examples into student examples that have been done. But again, it's very much about composition, and it's about seeing how things can combine. So here we've got the image of the rock cliff, and we insert the dog in the dog's mouth. And so some of that is just seeing that these two images could come together. Right? Not too much that you have to worry about relating to the lighting conditions because you've got the inside of the dog's mouth, kind of like the cave. Right? So this is an example that was done a while back, and obviously the image of the model was not his image, but the apple and kind of the combination of the two. So this is an example where they used somebody else's image, but they adapted it and worked upon it and kind of took that bite out. Part of what I think is particularly successful is the fact that it's selectively colored in the image. The apple is colored, and the eyes are colored, and the rest is in black and white. And it's the combination of those two that work particularly nicely. So this particular photo was not so much a collage of the person. The person is the person's photo, but all of the tattoos and stuff were added, and also the backdrop and the lines and all of that were added, and the zipper across the mouth were added. So it's a combination of little pieces that make the overall composition. This one's a little bit on the creepy side, and I think it would be far more successful if it didn't have quite such a dark background. And so the background dominates the photo a little bit too much. Right? This one was extraordinarily well done. Again, compositionally nice to be slightly off center, and then the combination of the cat and the girl put together end up being rather creepy, but at the same time really nicely done and well executed. So I think those worked very nicely. Right? So this one I include because it is not by any means the best photo in the world. Right? Compositionally, it's not that great. It's a rather generic, face-on flash photo. But the reason it works so nicely is because both the images were shot in the exact same way. Right? So you take the picture of the dog with the flash in the front, and you take a picture of the pigs in the flash in the same manner. So the lighting conditions match, therefore the two images go nicely together. Right? This one's a little bit more on the artistic side and kind of breaking the boundaries of what's possible. Compositionally very nice, but a little bit beyond the scope of what normally tends to happen. Image here is flower petals upside down becoming the dress. Again, a very simple image, a simple one to do, but very, very well done. Good lighting conditions. The shadow behind that falls on the back of the flower petal matches up with the way that the dancer's shadow also falls. So a combination of drawing here and the actual image and the tattoos reaching into the photo can be a really good way of breaking the frame and creating a compositionally interesting drawing. You guys all saw this on the handout. This is the colored version of it, but very much the same, but relatively simple to do, right? One picture of the girl standing against the wall, and then one picture of the t-shirt hanging from the wall, and then it's a combination such that everything that's here, right, is the picture of the t-shirt against the wall, and everything that's outside of that becomes just the picture of the person leaning against the wall. Right? So it's just that combination of two. So Bekem did this one, and I think it's a really good example, particularly because the shadows work so nicely in this. So she went out and she took a picture of herself sitting on one of the architecture lab stools. Obviously you recognize the setting here, right? It's the ET buildings. So she took a picture of herself sitting on the stool, and then she took a picture from the exact same location that was nothing there. It was just the natural setting. And she was able to mask off, right, where the stool was, but she paid attention to not only get rid of the foreground object, the stool, but also the shadow that the stool cast on the wall. So it's the combination of those two that make this very, very successful. Another example here of the, I woke up and I have no legs. Again, in the similar vein to what we've been talking about in the combination of just the two images. Right? Similar in this one, bleeding one image through, but I think compositionally this one works really nicely, even though it's a little bit on the strange side. Right? Again, it's what you see in the world, and so maybe you might see something like this. Again, compositionally very interesting, but the lighting conditions match up. So the photo of the woman and the photo of the violinist or the celloist or whatever it is, I'm not a musician, so you can correct me if I was incorrect in what I was calling it, but you get the idea. The lighting condition on both of those match up, and that's important. Right? The little figures that end up in the smoke, similar examples in kind of how those go together. A little bit more involved, a little bit more complicated, certainly a more advanced topic. So this one, you may or may not see it at first. It's the face that's in the bark. Somehow it's harder to see it on the projector than it is on the screen itself, but it's very subtle, and it's looking at the wrinkles, the natural wrinkles on a face, and kind of aligning them into the bark such that it starts to become this mystery in the bark. Right? The combination of the side view and the profile view and the frontal view, and kind of how those two come together, I think can be a very interesting combination. Blends with your mind a bit. Combination of drawing turning into the actual photograph. So you've got the same location, same shot. You've got the drawing of the pencil and the hand coming together, and it's drawing, but that transitions into the actual person's hand. Likewise, on the other side of that hand drawing, it's kind of a natural break between the pencil drawing and the color photograph. Right? Another example here, you could actually print out the pictures and then cut them, right? But in this particular case, it was a combination of masking that allowed her to do this without having to do it. But again, compositionally interesting in terms of how those come together. I think they were channeling The Walking Dead a little bit in this, but you get the idea of the combination of the skull and the woman and how they kind of work against each other. And so this is another example here of kind of the little container holding the mini tree. In this particular context, the tree and the landscape were then inserted into this little glass broken plastic ball. The dirt was collaged in. It's a lot of different elements that have come together with special attention to how the light actually plays into the scene. The fact that it's a very symmetrical composition, I think, still works because of the jagged edge of the plastic or glass sphere that kind of makes it not symmetrical anymore. Okay? So those are a bunch of examples that students have done in the past. If you're still needing more ideas, go look at the galleries of previous coursework to kind of see how things come together. And we're going to transition from seeing these examples into how to do masking and how to really isolate objects such that we can then combine them together. So let me transition for a second, and then I'll show you some examples. Okay, so we're going to continue on with exercise 107. And this involves a lot of demonstration on my part for how these kind of objects isolate. So what we're going to do in class today is we're going to isolate people. So we're going to take people out of a particular scene, make their backgrounds transparent, such that we could then integrate them into a new scene. And so kind of the trajectory of what we're doing, today we're dealing with the isolations and eliminating backgrounds and then saving the image files. And then next class, on Monday when you come back, we're going to talk about how do you take these pieces that you created and assemble them into a new scene such that they feel like they're part of that new scene. So it's kind of a combination of these two that will give you the skills to move forward in your assignment 102. So the first thing that I need, you guys were asked when you did your photography shoot the campus to take pictures of people. You may or may not like the pictures that you took. You may or may not decide to use them. If you decide to search for images, I'm perfectly okay with it. But I do request that you do a Creative Commons search. So again, search.creativecommons.org. and then you'll make a search query that's somewhat relevant to people. If you just type in people, you're probably not going to get the best results. But if you type in, people running, people jogging, something that people would do, person with suitcase, something like that, it might give you a variety of options. I used to always suggest that you type in, people walking. The problem is if you put in people walking, now all you get are pictures of people dressed up as the Walking Dead. So it's not quite the right search term anymore. So you have to get a little bit creative. I went through and found a variety of images already. Something like this with the dog walking I thought was pretty good. I haven't done a dog in a while. So I'll go ahead and download that image. Again, I want the original size if at all possible. And then I'll go ahead and show it and then copy this to my flash drive. Into today's folder. And I'll go ahead and paste. And I have some pictures of people running that I've already brought in that I found earlier today that I thought would be particularly good examples. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Photoshop. And then I'll go ahead and open up the picture. So I'm going to go to Open, and I'll do this dog one first, right, because it's probably the simplest one to do. Part of the reason that I think this is particularly simple is as I zoom in, there's not a lot of hair that's flowing. Let me open another one as example. Let me open this one of running, right? You see how if I look carefully at her, oops, I can't see, I'm sorry. Right, if I look carefully at her, see the hair that's over here? Let me use this as a pointer. Right, see this that's flowing? Right? This is a very difficult thing to isolate, right, because of all these little strands of hair. So that's going to involve a little bit more challenge. I'll do that one next. But we'll start with this one, which doesn't really have those little bits of hair. It's a relatively easy one to cut out, including the dog. So let's go ahead and work through that. So there are a variety of ways of going about isolating an object, and I used to concentrate on really showing you the various methods, including using the eraser or the background eraser tool. The truth is that none of those work as well as kind of a newer method, which is to use this quick selection tool. Right? It's the fourth one down. If you don't see it, you might see the magic wand. If you see the magic wand, it's underneath the magic wand. It's called the quick selection tool. And what this allows us to do is basically drag a little bit of a box, and it will start to look for edges. Right? And see how it's naturally formed a nice little edge along that person's coat, and then right down there along the sleeve, and then up and around the dog's ears. Right? I can continue with this selection by just continuing to drag, and I can get more and more selected. Right? So let me come up here to the person's head, and we'll work it around their head. Right? And it does a pretty darn good job of selecting, right, the person's head. And then I'll keep going, and I'll work my way around. I need to include some more of this background here, so we'll include some more there. Right? And let's come down here, and I'm going to keep going. And again, I'm getting pretty good results there all the way around. We'll keep going up here. Okay, so there's an example. So when I dragged up in this region, I lost the little leash, and I lost part of the dog's butt. Okay, so I need to get that back. So if I hold down the Alt key, right, and let me actually make this a little bit bigger so that hopefully you can see it. If I hold down the Alt key, you see that my little cursor changes from a plus to a minus. That means I can subtract from the selection. So I'll work my way back here and add this back in. Now, many times it's helpful to have this be a little bit smaller. So I'm using the bracket keys to make this smaller. And then I'm going to work my way, say, across the leash here. Something like that. Right? Now, this is a little bit hard to isolate because the colors of the background are so close to the colors of the dog's legs. Right? So maybe I can get the dog here, but I have to kind of work my way back and forth to get a good selection. Right there. Not too bad. Maybe a little bit more in there. And so it takes a little bit of time and a little bit of back and forth with that Alt key to really start to isolate the dog's legs. All right, and so we have to keep working it. All right, so I'm not going to spend quite as much time because if I sit here the whole time, you guys aren't going to get the bulk of the instruction that I want. So we'll pretend that I got a little bit closer here. Let me zoom out a little bit. And let me go ahead and add this part to the selection there, like that. I do need to get that part back. Okay, so now that I'm relatively close, right, I do need to add this section between the legs there. And then maybe subtract off this. There we go. So once I'm close to something like this, if we look over at my layers palette, I have one layer. It's called background, and it's locked. Okay? I want a duplicate that I can actually work with. So I'm going to right-click on background and say duplicate layer. And when I do that, I get a copy of the background. So two of the same layers. And I can actually turn off the background layer altogether and just leave it for later if I ever needed it back. Okay? And I'm going to work on this layer. So it should be highlighted in that pale blue. And once I have that highlighted, I'm going to use masking to basically isolate my objects. And so right now I have the background selected rather than the person selected. So if I want to select the person, I'm going to go up to the select menu and select inverse, which is going to select just the person and the dog rather than all of the background. And when I do that, I can then come down here and click on the Add Layer Mask button. And when I click on it, it isolates the person and gives me a transparent background. Now you can see that I'm missing parts of the dog's legs. And so I probably need to do a little bit more refinement. I also have some background over here that I really don't need. The good news about working in a mask is that, remember, anything that we paint, just like with the adjustment layers, anything that I paint in black doesn't have the transparency. So let me come back, and I'll use black with my brush. I need to make this a little bit smaller, and we'll zoom in a little bit here. And I can actually paint back in, oops, wrong color, white. I can paint back in the parts of the dog's leg that I missed. All right, so let me make this a little bit smaller, and then I can paint in, again, the parts of the dog's leg that I missed. There's the foot. Let me flip my colors so that I'm painting in black, and then I can isolate that out a little bit more. And so sometimes it's easier to just go in and manually do this after the fact. But again, the advantage of working with masking is that if I make a mistake, right, let's say I'm over here and I go like this, whoops, right? Because it's a mask, I can always go back, flip my colors, and I can paint that back into being solid. If we were using one of the others, say the background eraser tools or something like that, and I went too far and I erased too much, it's much, much harder to get it back, which is why I encourage you to work with these masks as you're doing it. Okay? So I'm going to move on, and I'm going to do something a little bit more complicated. I want to work here, especially with the hair, to show you how to isolate that. So I'll zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to do the same process here. I'm going to concentrate on isolating her rather than him. This is actually a good image because I could do both. I could do her and him relatively easily. So let me go ahead, and I'm going to start with my quick selection tool right here. I'm going to make my quick selection a little bit larger, something like this. And I'm going to start by selecting the background. Okay? So it already did a pretty good job. It outlined the hair, but it didn't get all of the hair, but it's close enough. And then I'm going to keep working my way along. Right? I lost part of her arm, so let me go back with the Alt key, and let's get her arm back. Like that. Right? I want that. And then we'll keep working our way down. And you can see, especially in this area where there's a sharp contrast, it's very, very easy and quick to drag your selection around. Oh, I lost too much there. Came back up to here. So again, I'll hold down Alt, and we'll get her legs back. Right, a little bit there. So it's really a combination of back and forth with the Alt key to get various pieces back. Get rid of that. A little bit more there. A little bit more there. that, right? And that's reasonable, except I'm missing that part of her hand. So there I have her hand back, and I need that little corner of her shorts. Something like that. All right, so maybe a little bit, oops, a little bit more right in there. And again, because it's going to be done with a mask, if I don't quite get it perfect, it's not the end of the world. All right, let's add that little triangle right in there. Maybe subtract off a little bit right there. So obviously, I have a little bit more practice than you guys, so I can make it look a little bit easier than it is. It'll take you guys a little while to get used to kind of the general strategy for how this stuff works, and when you add and when you subtract. Okay? So now let's pay attention to the hair. Right? And that's kind of a critical component to what I'm trying to work on here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a tool that's called Refine Edge. So now that I have the selection, I'm going to refine the edge of the selection. And it's available under the Select menu, Refine Edge, or this ribbon across the top here, I can click on Refine Edge. It's the same tool. Doesn't matter how you get to it. Okay? So that brings up this Refine Edge dialog box that's up here. And if we look at this first section under View Mode, I have a variety of ways of viewing it. We were just looking at it with the marching ants, the little dotted lines. But I can also look at it with an overlay, where I have kind of this reddish, pinkish color overlaying the selection. Okay? Likewise, I could look at it where it's just black. I could look at it where it's just white. I could look at it where it's black on white. And so I can relatively easily see what the edge looks like. Right? So I'm going to go back to the overlay mode for right now. And I'm going to come down here. I'm going to make a couple changes. Under Edge Detection, I'm going to do it at 1.0 as a radius. Under Adjust Edge Smoothing, I'm going to do it at 3. And then under Feather, I'm going to do it at 0.3. These are values that I've found to be relatively successful for what you're trying to do. But if you want to mess with the settings and play around with it, that's perfectly OK. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller, I hope. Right? And I'm going to paint over this hair at the edge. Right? Kind of cover that up. And you'll see that the hair is suddenly starting to be highlighted. But see how in between there I'm getting some blue shining through? Right? Likewise, I'll come over here, make this a little bit smaller, and I'm going to paint over that little bit of hair, maybe a little bit in the background. It might get a little confused with this palm tree, which is definitely a risk. But I just want to make sure that I paint out all of these little strands of hair, like that. If I hold down the Alt key, I could subtract from the selection. Right? If I went a little bit too far there, and then we can add to it with just a little bit, and then maybe subtract that part off. Right? So it's this kind of combination back and forth. Okay? If I switch into an on black, see how the hair is now starting to be highlighted? Right? And I'm seeing through the hair, where before it was just kind of a jagged shape. So as I work through this Refine Edge, I can really get a nice sharp edge. It works particularly well for hair. If I look down here, right, the bulk of this actually looks pretty decent. Right? So really the important part was that hair at the very top. Right there. So now that I've done that, right, we can switch back to overlay. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And when I do that, I get the selection again. It doesn't look all that different from a selection. Right? But there is a lot more that we just don't see that's selected in here. So now that I have that selection, I'm going to go back and do the same thing that I did before. So I'll right-click on Background, and I'll say Layer from Background, which gives me a layer that's, oops, sorry, that wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to say Duplicate Layer. It gives me a copy of the original. We'll go ahead and turn off the original so that I'm working on the copy. And then, once again, because I selected the background, I'm going to go to Select and then Inverse. So I'm selected just on her. And then I'll click on the Add Layer Mask. And so when I click on that Add Layer Mask, right, the background goes away, and we can see that I've maintained the hair, but if I had something behind this, right, that would shine through this particular little patch of hair. Looks like maybe I have a little bit too much here, so it may take a little bit of touch-up with my mask. And we'll paint with black. There's my brush. Right? And we could kind of clean that up just a little bit along the edge. Right? It also wouldn't hurt for me to come in here and double check. Is there anything else that I lost that I didn't mean to? Right? Looks pretty reasonable. I'm pretty happy. Maybe a little bit of touch up along the edge of the shoe, just to kind of smooth that out a little bit. Right? Remember, if I go too much, I can come back with the white and kind of fill in. Right? Sometimes you need to fill in a little bit of extra so you can see where that edge is. And then come back with the black and work your way right along the edge like that. Right? Something like that. Maybe a little bit more there. All right. So now that I have her isolated, I'll press Control 0, so we're back to just her. Now, I didn't completely isolate here, and I didn't completely isolate him, so I'm going to use the crop tool, right, to get rid of him and kind of narrow this down so that we're just working with her. Like that. I'll go ahead and say OK, but there's still a few pieces that I'm not happy with. So let me come back again to my mask with my brush. And I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger. Again, that's just the bracket key. And then I can paint those little pieces there. So the fact that she's isolated with this checkerboard background is exactly what I want. So now in terms of getting the final output, and I'll do this again with another one just so you guys can see me do it yet again, as I'm going to go to File, Save As. So previously we've always done Save for Web. This time I'm going to do Save As. And I'm going to change the format to be PNG. Right? The difference between a PNG and a JPEG is that a PNG preserves the transparent background. If I saved it as a JPEG, my background would turn white. Okay? So I want to make sure that it's a transparent background. And then we'll go ahead and say this is a woman running. And I'm going to append color, _color to it. And I'll go ahead and click on Save. I'll say OK to the defaults. And now I have her isolated and in color. Okay? What if I wanted her in black and white? And I'll save that version too. I'm going to go up to Layer, just as we've done before. I'll go to New Adjustment Layer, Channel Mixer. I'll turn it into monochrome, and then again play around with my various filters until I find whatever filter looks the best. Definitely not that one. Yeah, it's probably an orange or a red, something like that, for the black and white. And I'll go ahead and go File, Save As. Again, PNG. And this time, instead of color, I'm going to add BW for black and white. And I'll click Save. So now I have a black and white version and a color version. The reason that I do this now is it's a whole lot easier to have these ready to go when I go to integrate them in my scene. I don't have to worry about it anymore if I pre-make them black and white, color, and just a silhouette version. Because long term, when you're doing architectural collages, you're going to want people in them. And so if you have them pre-prepared, it makes life easy. The good news is you guys are all doing this, so there'll be, whatever, 150 new people to pick from. And there's obviously ones from prior classes as well, which are all posted on the website. So I have her in black and white. The last thing that I want to do is I want to make her a silhouette. And so I'm going to come over here to New Layer. This is just a regular layer. And I'm going to paint on that new layer with a gray that's a 75% gray. And I'll get to 75% gray by coming down here. I've got C value, M value, Y value, and K value. These are inks, cyan, magenta, yellow. So I'm going to do 0, 0, and 0. And then K, which is black, or key, I'm going to say at 75%, which gives me a 75% gray. So from there, I'll go ahead and paint on this layer with the gray. All right, now let's make this a little bit bigger so it takes less time. There it is. We'll paint that off. Okay. So because I used a mask to mask off the shape of this person, I can very easily hold down the Alt key and copy the mask on top of this layer to get myself a silhouette of her running. Okay. So now I have the silhouette, and I'll go ahead and go to File, Save As, PNG, and instead of color this time, I'll do it as gray. And then I'll go ahead and click Save. Okay, so I was able to go through and isolate the object and then make those 3 versions of it. So now it's a matter of posting it. So I'm going to go to the digital tool site. And of course, I should have already logged in. Bear with me for a second. All right, and I'm going to go to New Post. And this is going to be woman running. And then I'm going to upload all 3 images. So I clicked on this button for Add Media. I'm going to upload files, and I'm going to select all 3 of those files. So let's see here. 1, 2, and 3. I'll click Open. And it's going to take a little bit of time to upload. You see that there's lots of other people that have been uploaded today. And I'll go ahead and insert into Post. And I get 3 versions of her. Okay. Let me click on Set Featured Image, and I'll pick the colored image as the featured image. There. And then I'm also going to come over here. And as normal, under categories, we're going to pick this as exercise 107, right? But then below that, there's something called Collage Images, right? And this is where I want to categorize what this person is doing. So this person is running. Running is there. There's running, right? It's also, it's not an animal, right? This is a person, it's a female, right? It's a girl, it's a woman, etc. So I check these boxes to help categorize this particular post. So let me go ahead. It's woman running. I don't have to add my name here because it's going to be obviously tied to your account when you post it. And then I'll go ahead and click on Publish. So 3 images in the one post, right? You're going to do this 5 times with 5 different people. Okay? If you finish those 5 people, then you can move on and do like objects, like trees or something like that that's also complicated. The key is that you want to make sure you include the whole person. So an image where the person is cut off is not worth it, okay? Because it's not going to be able to integrate into a scene really nicely. So make sure you include the whole person. Okay? Once I'm done, I'll go ahead and click Publish, and it's published. When you go to look for these people on the course website, right, they're all listed under Resources, Collage Images. And so we have various categories of people, right, and things, like landscapes and stuff. So if we go into the people, let's see more people. Right, they're ordered by popularity, the ones people tend to use the most. Right? But let's say this one. Right? There's the person, right? Color, black and white, and silhouette. So you're more than welcome to use any one, right, of these images when you go forward in your architecture. Right? You're doing an example, you're doing like a perspective, and you want to collage in some people, right? And I'll do this at the end of the semester in this class. We'll go pick some of these people and we'll put them into the scene. Okay? But the point is that they all exist for you. One of the things that's valuable about this, if you start to have a collection of people, you will very easily be able to put people in your drawings, and it will always look more to scale, and it'll show your drawings a lot better if you have people. Generally speaking, people don't want to take the time to isolate the people. So if you do the work now, it'll be really easy to put the people in later, right? Which is part of why I'm making you do it. But of course, also part of the reason that I'm making you do it is so that you learn about masking and isolating objects. Okay? So do you guys want to see me do it again, or do you feel like you're ready to start? Again. Okay. So let's pick another one. I'm going to close these off for now. I don't need to save the changes. I don't need to save the changes. Right? And let's pick a different image. So let me go to File and then Open. How about that one? Right? We've got a little bit of hair there that I need to isolate, but generally speaking, this works pretty well. I do also have these little earbuds that I have to worry about. Right? So I now have this done. I'm going to start with this quick selection tool. Again, it's the 4th tool down. And I'm going to work my way around the girl. All right. If it's not quite perfect, I'm not going to worry about it quite so much yet. We'll work our way around. There. Okay, so it looks like I lost a little bit. So I need to add back in the arm. So let's zoom in. And I'm going to hold down the Alt key as I do this. We're going to add back in that arm. A little bit too much arm. There we go. I also need to subtract out this little triangle. We'll lose a little bit there. Okay. There's a little bit right there that needs to go away. All right, we'll come down. We need to include the legs. Oops. And so we'll keep working. Okay, getting there. I need that foot. Get those toes. All right, and we'll come over. We'll keep doing it here. And there I get the whole foot. Now if I come back up here, I've still got a little bit to work on in this vicinity. So let me add that part in right there. And again, this takes a lot of practice and kind of back and forth of what gets selected and what gets deselected. So there was too much. Right? We'll add this part in. Right? And I may or may not be able to get these little chords. I may have to come in and work on those afterward. It is possible if I zoom in a little bit further and I change my brush size down and I hold down Alt that I might be able to snake this right along the edge. But you see, as I do that, no matter how precise I am at doing this, it's not quite a perfect selection. Right? There's a little bit of stuff on either side that probably will need touch-up. So that might be an example of something to do after the fact. So let me continue on in here, make this a little bit bigger. I do want kind of general regions selected. Right, something like that. Let me hold down Alt. Get the rest of her hand. Subtract that off a little bit more. Come up. There. A little bit more right in there. Oops, too much. Right, I lost almost her whole head. I'm going to Control Z to get that selection back because I didn't mean to go quite that much. Oops. All right, come on. All right, fine. So sometimes you just have to go back and work it the opposite way. So there we go, got that back. A little bit more right in there. All right, so pretty good, right? But again, we have these little strands of hair that need to be resolved and a little bit of transparency right there in the ponytail. Okay? So now I'm going to click on Refine Edge. And again, I'm going to set my settings so that I have a radius of 1, a smoothing of 3, and a feather of 0.3. And then I don't say OK. I keep going, and I come over here, and I start to paint in where that hair is. Right? So let me go ahead and paint that in. All right, where little bits of the hair are, kind of right along that edge. Right a little bit in there. Definitely around here. Even a little bit that goes into there. A little bit right there. A little bit in there. Right? And that's just, those are the pieces that are shining through as part of the hair. So I can switch into my on black, and you can start to see that I do have little bits of the hair, right, shining through and sticking up as they should be. Okay? So now that I have those established, right, we'll go back to marching ants, and I'll go ahead and say OK, which gives me the selection. Okay? Remember that this selection, if I press Control 0, is the opposite of what I want. So I'm going to go up to Select and then Inverse. And then my background is currently locked, so I need a layer, a duplicate of that background. So let's duplicate the layer, turn off the background, and then I'll go ahead and click on the Add Layer Mask button. Which right here, it's a square with a circle inside. And when I click on that, it masks off the background. Right? There's the mask for this particular person. Now remember, I can go in and I can make adjustments after the fact. So for example, I lost the headphones. Right? I don't have them there. So I can come back with my mask. Let me go ahead and paint. And I need this a little bit smaller here. Again, bracket keys make it smaller. I'm going to be on the mask, and I'm going to paint in white. And I'm going to go kind of trace over where those little lines are. Right, and I'm not overly worried if I'm not perfect. Okay, so I have those lines showing. Now I'm going to flip my colors, zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to get rid of the background against that line. And so this takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of skill with the mouse, but with a little bit of time, I can isolate these headphones. Now that was a little bit too much, so let me come back. Now to get in that little groove, I'm going to have to make my brush even smaller. So we're going to come in there like that. We'll shave that down. Then once again, I'll make my brush bigger. And we'll work our way on this side. And so, of course, this takes time to do well, but at the same time, if I do it well, it will add a lot to the realism of her in the particular scene that I choose to put her in down the road. So let me keep going. A little bit more here to slice off. And there it is. If I press Control 0, right, I can see that now those little chords exist. Right? Now in reality, I need to do the rest of the chords in here, but I don't want you to have to sit and watch me do that because it's not really relevant to what you're trying to learn. The point is that now I have her nicely cut out. I have the chords showing here. And so now I'll save this as the color version. So I'll go to File, Save As, and again, save it as a PNG. And we'll call this Woman Running 2. And this isn't black and white, it's color. I'll click Save. And OK, there it is. Then, once again, I'll go back up to my image, or excuse me, my layer, New Adjustment Layer, Channel Mixer. And I'm going to apply a black and white tone to it. Remember, I'm going to go through the various examples till I find the one that I like. Once I have that, I'll go to File, Save As. Again, switching to PNG. And this is going to be PNG, or excuse me, BW for black and white. Click Save. Okay. And then the last one is that gray layer. So I'll go ahead and create a new layer. Go back to my paintbrush. Make sure my color 00075. And then we'll make my brush a little bit bigger again with the bracket keys. And we'll paint this layer in. And then I'm going to click on the mask, hold down Alt, and drag it up on top of that layer to get the silhouette. Okay? Then I'll go ahead and save this. I'll go to File, Save As. Once again, PNG. Oops. And this time, instead of color, it will be gray. And then once again, I'll make this post on the course website and tag it appropriately. Okay? So I'm going to turn you loose. I fully anticipate that you're going to need little bits of help along the way. It's just kind of the way it works today. Little reminders. I expect that this is going to take you the whole time. It did almost everybody this morning. So remember, it's 5 people, and then once you get those 5 people done, you'll move on to 5. You could keep doing people if you wanted, but you can do 5 more other objects, right? And if you don't get to all of them, it's not the end of the world. You should get through the first 5 people, though, today. Okay? All right, so I'll turn you loose, and I'll come around and help as you need it.